I always thought living alone was peaceful. Sure, it's lonely sometimes, but I liked having control over my own space. My little apartment on the edge of town was quiet, nothing fancy, but that night changed how I felt about solitude forever. It was just past midnight, maybe 12:30 a.m. I was winding down, scrolling on my phone, when I noticed the reflection in my living room window. I had the lights off, the street lamp outside casting a dull glow, and there clear as day was a shadowy figure standing just outside, right at the window. I froze. My heart raced as I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, or maybe someone walking past the building on the street. But this wasn't the usual fleeting shadow. This figure was still watching. I blinked, but it didn't move. Slowly, I reached for my phone to snap a picture. But the moment I raised it, the figure vanished like it never existed. I told myself it was probably a homeless person or prankster. Still, I locked the door and pulled the curtains tight. But then, around 2 a.m., I heard it. A soft tapping on the window. Not hard enough to break glass, but enough to make me jump. I grabbed a baseball bat from under the couch and approached the window carefully. No one was there. I called the police and told them what happened. They said they'd send a patrol. When the officer arrived, he searched around but found no signs of anyone. Maybe an animal, he said. But animals don't stand still and watch you through a window. The next week, I installed security cameras. One night, at about 1:45 a.m., I got an alert on my phone. I checked the footage. There it was, a dark figure, face hidden, pressed against the glass. The camera caught its breath, fogging the window. It stayed there for almost 5 minutes, staring in, before slipping away down the alley. I haven't slept properly since. Every night I check the windows, but the figure never shows up in the daylight. Only at night, only when I'm alone. I don't know what it wants. But I do know one thing: someone's at the window, and they're not just watching. They're waiting. I never believed in ghosts or anything supernatural, but after what happened to me, I don't know what to think anymore. It all started when I moved into this old house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where you know your neighbors' names and leave your doors unlocked. The first few nights were normal. I'd watch TV, read, go to bed. But then I started noticing something weird. Every night, around 11 p.m., I'd hear soft footsteps outside my bedroom window. At first, I thought it was just an animal or maybe a neighbor walking their dog. But the footsteps were slow, deliberate, like someone pacing. One night, I got curious. I turned off all the lights and quietly crept to the window. Peering through the blinds, I saw him. A man, standing just outside, staring up at my window. His face was shadowed by a hoodie, but I could feel his eyes locked on me. I froze. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. He just stood there for what felt like forever, then slowly turned and walked away. The next morning, I told the landlord, hoping he'd do something, but he just shrugged and said the neighborhood was safe. Over the next few weeks, the visits continued. Every night, the same time, the same slow footsteps. The man never tried to hide or run off. It was like he wanted me to know he was there. One night, I decided to confront him. I waited until 11 p.m., then opened the window a crack and called out, "Who's there? What do you want?" Silence, then a whisper back, barely audible, "I'm sorry." That's when I felt the overwhelming chill creeping up my spine. The man's figure dissolved into the darkness, like a shadow fading with the wind. I never saw him again, but sometimes at night, I still hear those footsteps, slow, deliberate, like a quiet watcher who never really left. It was a cold winter night when I first noticed the figure in the window. I lived alone in a small apartment on the second floor of an old building in the city. Nothing fancy, but it was home. That night, I was getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth, turning off the lights one by one. As I reached the bathroom mirror, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. A faint movement in the living room window reflection. I turned quickly, but no one was there. I shrugged it off as my imagination. Then, a few nights later, the same thing happened. Only this time, the figure was clearer, a silhouette of a man standing just outside my window. I blinked, but when I looked directly, he was gone. I checked the balcony door locked tight. My heart raced. I told myself it was probably a trick of the light or a passerby on the street reflected in some other window. But the figure kept appearing, always in the reflection, never outside. One night, I stayed up late, watching the mirror and the window simultaneously. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the silhouette appeared again. This time, it wasn't a man, it looked like a woman, her face pale and eyes hollow. I wanted to look away, but I was frozen. Suddenly, her mouth opened, not in a scream, but as if she was trying to say something. I leaned closer to the mirror, straining to hear. "Help me," she whispered. My blood ran cold. I ran to the window and flung open the curtains, nothing but empty street and snow. The reflection was gone. I never saw her again, but sometimes when I look in the mirror at night, I swear I hear a faint whisper begging for help. I've always been a light sleeper, but after what happened last winter, I barely sleep at all. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, in a small house with big windows that face the street. One cold, windy night, I woke up to the sound of scratching on the window next to my bed. At first, I thought it was a branch scraping the glass, so I tried to go back to sleep. But then I heard breathing, slow, deliberate, right outside the window. I froze. I didn't want to turn on the light or move, scared I'd see something I didn't want to. After what felt like an eternity, I finally dared to glance. There, pressed against the cold glass, was a face pale, with eyes that reflected the dim streetlight. It wasn't human. The mouth was twisted into a silent scream, and those eyes seemed to bore right into my soul. I blinked, and the face vanished. The next morning I checked outside. No footprints in the snow, no signs anyone had been there. I installed new locks and even security cameras, but the cameras never caught anything. Still, every night around 3 a.m., the scratching and breathing return. And every night, I find myself staring at the window, waiting, because I know it's coming back, and I don't think it wants to leave.